Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. Today, we're looking into some really foundational principles of Turkish constitutional law, and we're drawing from material over at Turkish Law Talks.
That's right. We'll be focusing mainly on the republicanism principle and the unitary state principle.
Exactly. And we'll also touch upon what it means for Turkey to be a state that respects human rights. Uh, just quickly, if any questions pop up while you're listening, feel free to drop them in the comments below the video.
Definitely. We'd love to hear from you.
Okay, so let's jump right in. First up, the republicanism principle.
Right. So when we talk about republic in constitutional law, it's interesting because, well, there are really two main ways to think about it. There's a narrow sense and then a broader sense.
Okay, narrow and broad. What's the narrow one?
The narrow definition, it's pretty straightforward. It just means a state that isn't a monarchy. So the head of state's job isn't passed down through inheritance.
Got it. So the opposite of having a king or queen where it stays in the family?
Exactly. That's the narrow view.
And the broad sense, what does that cover?
Well, the broader view kind of equates republic more with democracy itself. It pulls in ideas like popular sovereignty, power with the people,
Mm.
equal citizenship for everyone, and having political bodies, especially the head of state, chosen through elections for fixed terms.
Okay, so much more about the how of governing, not just the lack of a monarch.
Precisely.
So when we look at Article 1 of the Turkish Constitution, which says, the state of Turkey is a republic,
Mm.
which meaning are they using? Narrow or broad?
That's a great question. And the insight here is that Article 1 specifically uses republic in that narrower sense. It's primarily about being non-monarchical.
And there's history behind that choice.
Absolutely.
Right.
If you think back to when the Republic was proclaimed, October 29th, 1923, the immediate goal wasn't necessarily a full overnight switch to democracy as we might think of it now.
Uh-huh.
The main thing, the priority, was setting up a system where the head of state wasn't hereditary. Breaking from the Ottoman tradition was key.
Right, establishing that fundamental shift away from inherited rule.
Exactly. That non-hereditary aspect was the core of proclaiming it a republic initially.
That's a really helpful distinction, because didn't the earlier 1921 Constitution already have some democratic ideas in it?
It did, yes. Article 1 of the 1921 Constitution already said sovereignty belongs to the nation, unconditionally, and the government works on the principle of the people governing themselves.
Yeah.
And Article 2 added that the Grand National Assembly was the sole representative of the nation. So some democratic foundations were already being laid.
So the 1923 proclamation was more about formalizing the non-hereditary head of state part, building on what was already there.
In large part, yes. It cemented that break with monarchy.
Okay, that makes sense why establishing the republic wasn't instantly the same as having a full democracy.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the structure of the current Constitution supports this narrow reading of Article 1.
Yes, exactly. Look at how it's laid out. Article 1 says, Turkey is a republic. Then Article 2 comes right after and lists the qualities of this republic.
And one of those qualities is?
One of those qualities listed explicitly in Article 2 is democratic state. So think about it. If republic in Article 1 already meant democratic, why list democratic states separately in Article 2? It would be, well, redundant.
Right. You wouldn't need to state it again if it was already implied in Article 1.
Precisely. The structure reinforces that Article 1's primary job is establishing the non-monarchical form.
So to sum up Article 1, it's the rule against monarchy. No inherited head of state.
That's the core of it. It prohibits transferring that office through inheritance.
And then Article 2 comes along and says, okay, this non-monarchical state, this republic, is also democratic, among other things.
That's the logical flow. Article 2 builds on the foundation laid by Article 1, specifying the kind of republic Turkey is.
Okay, clear. Let's shift then to the unitary state principle. What does unitary mean when we talk about how a state is organized?
Right. So when looking at political organization, you basically have compound states and unitary states. A compound state is, well, like a union of two or more states coming together.
Like a federation, perhaps.
Federations are a type of compound state, yes. But a unitary state, or a simple state, is different. It's characterized by unity. Unity in its basic elements and its governing bodies. Think central authority.
So one single system running the show, not multiple levels of sovereign power like in federalism.
Exactly. A key feature is a single constitutional order, a single legal system for the whole country. The political and administrative structure follows one unified plan.
And what are the core elements that show this unity?
You see unity in the elements of the state itself. So a single territory that's seen as indivisible, a single nation living in that territory, sharing a common political identity, and crucially, single sovereignty, one ultimate source of authority.
And unity in the organs. That means the government structure.
Yes, a unitary state typically has one national legislature making laws for everyone.
Like the Grand National Assembly in Turkey.
Correct. One executive branch to enforce those laws nationwide, and one unified judicial system to interpret them.
So power is concentrated nationally.
Traditionally, yes, that's the model. Central administration, maybe headed by the president or president and ministers, handles policy and services. But it's important to add that unitary states aren't always rigidly centralized anymore.
How so? They can have regional bodies.
Yes, many have evolved. To govern more effectively, address local needs, they might set up autonomous administrative structures at regional or local levels.
Like local governments.
Exactly. Or the central administration itself might be organized into different levels, like headquarters and provincial offices. But the key point is these administrative arrangements, this decentralization, doesn't change the fundamental unitary nature. The ultimate authority still resides centrally.
Okay, so having local administration doesn't make it non-unitary. Where does Turkey fit? Does the Constitution actually say Turkey is a unitary state?
Interestingly, no. There isn't one single sentence that explicitly states that.
Oh, so how do we know?
We conclude it's unitary by looking at Article 3 mainly, but really in context with the entire Constitution.
Article 3. That's the one about Turkey being an indivisible whole with its territory and nation.
That's the one, but you have to be careful. Just saying your territory and nation are indivisible isn't proof on its own that you're a unitary state.
Why not?
Because federal states often say the same thing. They usually consider their overall territory and their people as indivisible too.
Ah, okay, so Article 3 is a big clue, but not the whole picture. We need the rest of the Constitution to confirm it.
Exactly. You connect Article 3 back to those characteristics we just discussed. Unity of elements, unity of organs. The Constitution as a whole sets up a single territory, a single nation, single sovereignty.
And the single organs.
Right. A single legislature, the GNA, a single executive, a single judiciary. And importantly, one constitution. One overarching legal order for the whole country. There aren't separate state constitutions or state legal systems like in a federation.
So the whole design just screams unitary, even without using the exact word.
That's a good way to put it. The framework itself establishes it.
Okay, let's dig into Article 3 a bit more then. What does that phrase, indivisibility of the country, really mean in practice? What are the consequences?
It means the national territory is basically untouchable. It cannot be divided, fragmented, or given away, period.
So specific things are forbidden.
Yes. It leads to several clear consequences.
Mm-hmm.
First, no chunk of Turkish territory can be handed over to another country.
Right.
Second, no region can just decide to leave and become independent. Secession is out.
Right.
Third, you can't break Turkey up into multiple independent states or even turn it into a federation of states within the current borders.
No internal fragmentation either.
Correct. And finally, the whole country can't just decide to become part of some other country's territory. It protects the existence and integrity of the national territory itself.
Very clear prohibitions then. It really emphasizes the permanence of the territory. Now, Article 3 also mentions the indivisibility of the nation. What's the core idea there?
This part stresses equality and unity among the people. It means within the Turkish Republic, you can't discriminate or create legal distinctions between people based on things like their language, religion, ethnic background, culture, etc.
So everyone is equal under the umbrella of the Turkish nation.
Yes, everyone who is part of that nation is subject to the same national sovereignty, the same laws.
What does that mean day to day or in terms of rights?
Practically, it means all citizens have the same fundamental rights and the same duties. No group gets special treatment, positive or negative, based on their background. So, no discrimination when it comes to participating in government, accessing services based on language, religion, ethnicity, and so on. And importantly, you can't create different systems of sovereignty or different legal statuses for specific communities or groups within the nation.
Everyone operates under the same single framework.
Exactly. It's about equal status, equal treatment, and rejecting any kind of legally recognized internal divisions based on group identity.
So it pushes back against certain ideas.
Yes, it fundamentally rejects both territorial federalism, where
Yeah.
you have geographic regions with lots of autonomy, and what's sometimes called corporate federalism.
Corporate federalism, what's that?
That's where, instead of basing federal units on geography, you base them on distinct communities, like religious sects or ethnic groups, giving them their own separate legal or political structures within the state.
I see.
The principle of the indivisibility of the nation in the Turkish constitution says no to both models. It insists on one unified citizenry under one sovereignty.
Okay, that really rounds out the unitary state principle alongside republicanism. Let's turn now to Article 2 again, and this idea of Turkey being a state respecting human rights. What are the key elements here?
Right, Article 2 lists this as another fundamental quality of the republic: state respecting human rights. At its heart, human rights are those basic rights and freedoms everyone has just because they're human.
Inherent rights.
Inherent, universal, they apply everywhere.
Okay.
Everyone indivisible, interdependent, and crucially, they should be enjoyed without any discrimination. Race, language, religion, political opinion, origin, status, none of that should matter.
So a state respecting human rights is one that upholds these rights for everyone equally.
That's the definition. It's a state that acknowledges these rights, protects them, and makes sure people can actually enjoy them without discriminatory distinctions.
Sounds like a big commitment. What does it actually require the state to do to live up to that? Are there specific obligations?
Yes, generally we talk about 4 key interconnected requirements for a state to genuinely respect human rights.
Okay, what are they?
First, the state has to formally recognize human rights. Second, it has to ensure their implementation. Third, it needs to protect against unjust interferences. And fourth, it must provide remedies, including compensation, when rights are violated.
Recognize, implement, protect, and compensate. Let's break those down. What does recognition involve?
Recognition basically means getting these rights written down into the law, putting them in the Constitution, in statutes, and also signing on to international human rights treaties and making them part of domestic law.
So making them official.
Exactly. The state creates or accepts a list of rights and formally binds itself to uphold them. That's the first step.
Okay, then step 2. Ensure implementation. What does that entail? It sounds more active.
It is much more active. Just having rights on paper isn't enough, right? The state has to take positive steps so people can actually use and enjoy these rights in real life.
Like what kind of steps?
Well, things like education, making sure citizens and officials know about human rights, enacting specific laws and regulations that give practical effect to the rights, setting up mechanisms like courts or commissions where people can go if their rights are violated.
Ways to seek redress.
Yes. And it also involves working with others, nationally and internationally, to promote and realize these rights better. It's about creating the conditions for rights to flourish.
Got it. It's proactive work. Now the third one, protection against unjust interferences. What does that mean?
This has 2 sides. First, the state itself must not unjustly interfere with people's rights. State officials can't violate them unlawfully.
Okay, the state restraining itself.
Right. But second, the state also has a positive duty to protect people from having their rights interfered with by third parties.
Like other individuals or private groups?
Exactly. Other people, companies, groups within society. The state needs laws against such interference. It needs effective legal remedies if it happens, and it should try to prevent it in the first place and fix any harm done.
So, protect from the state and from others. Makes sense. And the final requirement, compensation for damage.
Yes. If a human rights violation does occur, especially by a public official, the state has an obligation to provide an effective remedy. And often, that includes financial compensation for the harm suffered.
The state pays for the violation.
The state is liable, yes. Article 40, paragraph 3 of the Turkish constitution actually says this directly. If someone suffers damage from unlawful actions of public officials, the state has to compensate them according to the law.
Is there accountability for the official involved?
Yes, the same article mentions the state has the right to then go after the official responsible, what's called the right of recourse. So there's a mechanism for holding the individual official accountable too.
That really paints a full picture of what state respecting human rights means under Article 2. It's clearly not just a phrase, but involves recognition, active implementation, protection, and providing remedies.
Absolutely. It's a continuous commitment that requires action on many fronts to make human rights a reality for everyone.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. We've covered republicanism, the unitary state principle, and what it means to respect human rights under the Turkish constitution. Thank you so much for walking us through these complex ideas.
My pleasure. It's good to discuss them.
And a big thank you to all of you listening. If you found this deep dive helpful, please do subscribe to the Turkish Law Talks YouTube channel and give this video a like.
It helps others find the content.
Indeed. We look forward to exploring more legal topics with you in our next lesson. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.